everyone, and welcome back to Miss Key's Classroom. My name is Rachel and today is a little bit of a different video, a little bit more of a personal one. It is February here in South Australia and term 1 has just started, and that actually means that I'm heading into my 5th year of teaching overall. It's very hard to believe that I've been doing this for that long now, but I thought it was a good time to sort of reflect on the things I've learned during my first 4 years of teaching and maybe some of the things that I wish I'd known before I became a teacher. So that's what I wanted to share with you in this video today. So thank you so much for joining me and I hope you enjoy this one. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so let's dive right in with these big lessons that I've sort of learnt over my first 4 years. There's definitely some of these in here that are things I wish I'd known before I started out, so I'll make sure I flag those ones with you as well. But the first one is something that another teacher actually taught me, and it's that you won't always get to see the impact that you have on students. And the lovely Amanda from Hands on Heads actually told me this. If you haven't checked out her page before, definitely have a look at it because she has some incredible PD, so much stuff about literacy as well. So definitely check her out. But we were having a conversation one day and she said, I think it's really interesting how we don't always necessarily get to see the difference that we make in a student's life. It might not always be super overt and that sort of light bulb moment that we get in the classroom. It might be many years later that the difference you actually made becomes evident, and we don't always get to see that as teachers. And I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at the teaching profession, because obviously, like I said, there is that sort of immediate response that you get from students when you teach them something. But I think those kind of longer term impacts that we have on them, we don't always get to see that. And you know, I still talk about different teachers that I've had during high school and primary school with my friends, and I think it's wonderful to think about how much of a long-term impact teaching can have. So not necessarily getting to see all of the amazing differences that you make in a student's life was one of the lessons that I learned, and it's such a positive one. So I wanted to mention that first. The next lesson that I learned is, I guess, far less cute than the last one, and it's that you need to stay on top of your admin. I think any experienced teachers will tell you this. And it's sort of something that they don't really cover at uni so much. And so for me, it was definitely a shock going into my first teaching role and realizing how much admin is involved in teaching. It's not just lesson planning and unit planning and delivering the content. There's so much stuff that happens behind the scenes that we have to do as well. And so that was definitely a shock for me. That's one of the things that I wish I'd known before I set out on my career. But things like setting reminders to reply to emails, that's a big thing that I did, because often I'd read an email and I'd think, oh yeah, I'll get back to that later. And then later it would be 3 weeks and I still hadn't replied to it. And so now I set myself reminders to reply to different emails if I can't do it at that particular time. Following up on absences, keeping contact with parents, staying on top of your professional development requirements, all of those things definitely come under this banner of staying on top of your admin. So that is the second big thing that I learned, and is definitely something I wish I'd known about before I started my teaching career. Okay, so the next thing that I learned is that you can't be everything to every student, and you're not going to be everyone's favorite. Not all students are going to like you, and that is okay. What's far more important is that they respect you and that you are doing your best to teach them what you are meant to be teaching them. So as someone who is a classic people pleaser like me, the idea that some students might not like me was a bit of a tough pill to swallow. And definitely I struggled with that in my first year or so of teaching, because all I wanted was the students to like me, because I thought that that meant, that they would enjoy my lessons and that they would learn. But as I said, what I found was way more important was that I built that relationship with students that were based on respect. It wasn't necessarily about me so much as a person, and it was more about whether they were learning or not. That's the most important thing, because that's our job as teachers, is to teach the kids. So that was definitely a big learning curve for me. But once I did learn this lesson, that it's okay if I'm not everyone's favorite, and it's okay if students don't like me, and that the most important thing is that they are learning, my classes became a lot more effective and my teaching itself became a lot more effective. So yeah, that was definitely a big one for me to learn. Okay, so the next things I've learned are all a little bit intertwined, so I'm going to talk about them together. But the first one is that not everything has to be perfect in order for it to be amazing. This is definitely something that I learned in my first year of teaching because I am a classic perfectionist and I like everything to be just the way I want it. And my lesson plans and my lessons were no exception to that. However, that resulted in me staying up very late at night, poring over my lesson plans and my resources, making sure they were exactly the way I wanted them before I walked into the class the next day. And that didn't always result in amazing lessons. And what I actually found was that often the lessons where I hadn't planned as much and I went with the flow a little bit more, they were the lessons that the students actually enjoyed the most or got the most out of. And so I no longer spend hours and hours poring over my lesson plans and making sure they are planned down to the minute. Instead, I'm a lot more open to sort of taking things as they come within lessons because, like I've discovered, it doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be amazing. And then leading on from that, I discovered that making mistakes is not a bad thing and that it is actually the best way that we learn. So again, because I was such a perfectionist, I mean, I still am to some extent, but nowhere near as much as I was when I started out, I was terrified of messing up and terrified of, I guess, making a mistake in front of the class, having the students think that I didn't know what I was doing. But what I found was that when I did make mistakes, I learnt so much from them. So while at the time it might have been really annoying that I'd made a mistake, I'd messed something up, I wasted time, in the long run, it actually helped me so much because I learned a better way to do something, or I changed the way I was teaching something and made it even better than it already was. So being comfortable with making mistakes was a massive thing that I learned, but I also discovered that showing students when you make mistakes and acknowledging when you've made a mistake is a really powerful thing for them as well, and it actually encourages them to take risks in their own learning as well, because sometimes students might be a bit nervous to try something new, they're worried about messing up, but showing students that it's okay to try something and not be amazing at it, or it's okay to make a mistake, actually encourages them to take risks in their learning, and I think that's a really powerful thing. Okay, next learning, a very, very big one, is to find your teacher pals. I'm talking about people that you can rely on, people who are positive, people who will encourage you, who'll give you constructive criticism, who will lift you up when you're feeling down, who'll share resources with you, whatever it is. Find those teacher pals. Sometimes it can be really hard for people who aren't teachers to sort of understand what it is like to be a teacher. And so connecting with other teachers, bouncing ideas off of them, asking for advice, I would 100% recommend. I certainly would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the amazing teacher friends that I've made within this profession. And these teacher friends could come from so many different places. Maybe it's people you met at uni. Maybe it's people who are working at your school. Maybe it's people who you've previously worked with. It could even be people online. The teaching community on Instagram that I'm a part of is absolutely incredible. Everybody on there is so uplifting, so positive, and so willing to help. So if you haven't already got some really solid teacher friends, make it a goal of yours this year to seek out other teachers and see if you bond with them, because my teacher friends really are some of my most cherished friends, and I wouldn't be the same teacher I am today if it wasn't for them. Okay, I think I'm up to my last big lesson that I learnt, and something that I definitely wish I had been told before I started teaching. There are going to be some really, really hard days when you're a teacher. Sometimes things just really won't go to plan, and a bad day goes to a worse day, and it just snowballs from there. And it can be really, really hard to not let that get you down. So the best way that I have found to deal with a bad day is taking some time to reflect on maybe what didn't go so well that day, whether it was a particular lesson, an interaction with a student, whatever it was, and think about what could I have done differently in that situation to maybe change the outcome of that. Within that sort of self-reflection, I always make sure that I'm treating myself with kindness. We are all only human at the end of the day, and we are all trying our absolute best. And sometimes things just don't go to plan and everything unravels in front of you. But treating yourself with kindness and recognizing, hey, I had a bad day and that's okay, is really, really important. Because unfortunately, if you have had a bad day or a bad week or a bad term, it can be really hard to sort of pull yourself out of that and not get down on yourself. But I always try and approach those reflections with kindness to make sure that I'm not being unnecessarily hard on myself. Like I said, everyone makes mistakes and we learn the best from them. And so taking that time to reflect does help you learn from whatever bad situation might have happened. Then once I have reflected on the situation, I've worked out maybe what I could have done differently. Sometimes there's nothing you could have done differently. I put that to bed. I let it go, because at the end of the day, keeping on rehashing what happened, going over and over it in your head, isn't going to change what happened. All you can do is look at what you could do differently next time. And once you've worked that out, it's time to release what happened and just move on and look forward to the next day. I found that that little process of reflecting and then releasing is the best way to keep moving forward and not dwell on what's happened. So then the next day I can walk into the classroom with a fresh mindset. I've left whatever happened the day before in the past, and I can move on and keep teaching again. So that's the little process that I've found works for me. I wish someone had told me that earlier on, because unfortunately when I was on placement, I had lots of bad days, as lots of us do when we're on placement, and I would dwell on them over and over again. And I would worry about what I'd done in a lesson or what went wrong. But at the end of the day, worrying about what's already happened isn't going to change it. All you can do is change what you do next time. And so that little process of reflecting and then releasing, I found has really helped me get through any bad days that do come around. Alrighty, so I think I have rambled on long enough about all of the lessons that I've learnt during my first 4 years of teaching. I would absolutely love to have your input on this and hear what your sort of big teaching lessons were that you've learnt during your time as a teacher. Please drop them in the comments below. I would absolutely love to read them. But for now, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful start to the school year if you are in Australia and heading back as well. For now though, I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!